Neo-Noir Navigator. The city was Shadowfall Metropolis, a sprawling tangle of steel and glass forever draped in a low, artificial twilight. Rain was a constant companion here, a fine, cold mist that slicked the streets and made the neon glow bleed into blurry streaks. The air was thick with it, mixed with the harsh smell of ozone, cheap alcohol that burned with a chemical tang, and something metallic, like burnt circuitry. This was a city that never truly slept, only shifted uneasily in its damp, grimy bed. Buildings clawed at the sky, their higher floors lost in the perpetual drizzle, while below, endless streets coiled through canyons of concrete and flickering light. Every alley seemed to hum with unseen currents, every shadow held a secret, and every whisper carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories. In a small, cluttered office on the 34th floor of the crumbling Hydra Tower, Jake Riley watched the rain fall. He was a private investigator, the kind they called data scrappers now. His face was a map of tired lines, etched by too many late nights spent chasing digital ghosts and fueled by too much bitter, lukewarm coffee. His coat, a worn trench made of synthetic leather, smelled of old cigarettes, stale information, and the city's pervasive damp concrete. He'd seen most of what Shadowfall had to offer, from the glittering, deceptive heights of the corporate spires to the grimy, forgotten depths of the lower sectors. He knew its twisting alleys better than his own memory, and its secrets clung to him like the perpetual damp, an uncomfortable second skin. His desk was a chaotic monument to his profession, a mess of antiquated holopads, empty bottles of potent, artificial spirits, the kind that promised forgetfulness but only delivered a dull ache, and flickering data screens displaying fragmented news feeds and dead-end leads. The only consistent light came from the gaudy neon sign of a noodle bar across the street, casting a sickly, pulsing green glow into the room. He preferred it that way. The city's oppressive brightness always felt like it was trying too hard, trying to hide something darker and more profound beneath its manufactured gleam. Silence, or at least the dull roar of the city, was his companion. He found comfort in the predictable rhythm of the metropolis's hidden pulse. The sudden, sharp chimes of his office door cut through the quiet hum of his ancient air filter, startling him. A client. He rarely got walk-ins anymore. Most people in Shadowfall, especially those with genuine problems and money to solve them, went to the big corporate agencies now, the ones with pristine, sterile offices and even cleaner, more discreet records. His clientele typically consisted of the desperate, the overlooked, or those running from something the official channels couldn't, or wouldn't, touch. The woman who stepped in was a splash of vivid, almost defiant color against the monochromatic backdrop of the sprawl's perpetual gloom. She wore a sleek, blood-red coat that shimmered even in the dim light of his office, a stark contrast to his own faded existence. Her eyes, a striking emerald green, seemed too bright, too sharp for the dim confines of his office, and too keenly intelligent. She moved with a controlled grace, her posture betraying no overt fear, but Jake, with his years of sifting through human anxieties, could detect a deep, unsettling worry hidden just beneath her composed facade. Her hands, he noticed, were clasped tightly, almost imperceptibly, in front of her. "Mr. Riley." Her voice was low, smooth, almost melodic, like expensive synth silk whispering across glass. It held a subtle tremor, carefully masked. Jake nodded, grunting a confirmation. "That's me. Jake Riley. Take a seat." He waved a hand at the only other chair in the room, currently piled high with old data chips, discarded holomags, and a forgotten coffee mug. She surveyed the mess for a moment, then, with quiet grace, she brushed the detritus aside without a single flinch or grimace, sitting down as if she were settling into the most opulent lounge in the Glimmer district. Her composure, despite her inner turmoil, was remarkable. "My name is Alara Thorne," she said, her gaze steady, locking onto his with an intensity that made him feel scrutinized. "My sister is missing." Jake leaned back, the old office chair groaning under his weight in protest. The springs creaked a mournful tune. "Missing, huh? What's her name?" He reached for his personal holopad, its screen still blank, waiting for the details. Missing persons were a common enough request, but rarely from someone who dressed with such obvious expense. "Her name is Serafina Thorne," Elara replied, her voice tightening almost imperceptibly as the name crossed her lips. She disappeared 3 nights ago. From her apartment in the Glimmer District." The Glimmer District. Jake's internal alarm bells, long accustomed to the clatter of the lower sprawl, went off. That was where the bright, shiny people lived, the ones who bought expensive tech and wore clean clothes, whose lives were curated and spotless. Not Jake's usual beat. His cases typically involved lost data, shady corporate deals gone south, or runaway corporate drones trying to escape their contracts. Missing persons, especially from the Glimmer, usually ended up with the City Watch enforcers, Shadowfall's heavily armored, omnipresent police force, or the specialized, well-funded corporate security outfits that served the elite. They had resources he could only dream of. "Why me, Miss Thorne?" Jake asked, his voice rough with suspicion, his eyes narrowing slightly. "The Watch has better resources. More personnel. Or one of the high-end outfits, they can track a digital ghost across the entire net." Elara's emerald eyes met his, unwavering, holding a depth of pain he hadn't initially perceived. "The Watch closed the case, Mr. Riley. Said she likely fled with a virtual identity package, looking for a new life. They barely looked." A bitter, almost contemptuous edge crept into her tone, cutting through the smooth exterior. "They filed it away, dismissed it as another lost soul. And the corporate outfits, they only care if you're a valuable asset. If you have a high market value, intellectual property to protect. Serafina wasn't. Not in their eyes. She was an artist. A data sculptor." Jake raised an eyebrow, a flicker of genuine interest sparking in his tired eyes. "A data sculptor. That changed things. They were the ones who took the raw, chaotic stream of the city's data, the digital echoes and forgotten fragments, and shaped them into beautiful, intricate virtual worlds or immersive experiences. Often, to find their inspiration, they delved into the city's hidden data streams, the parts the City Watch didn't want anyone to see, the unofficial archives, the dark corners of the net. This just got infinitely more interesting. This was his territory. "What kind of data sculptor?" he pressed, leaning forward slightly, the chair creaking again. He reached for a fresh, unlit cigarette, a nervous habit. "She specialized in ambient memory reconstructions," Elara explained, her voice softening as she spoke of her sister's passion. "She'd gather fragmented digital echoes from old districts, discarded network signals, even thermal imprints from abandoned buildings. She'd weave them into immersive experiences, allowing people to feel the past, to walk through phantom histories." Elara paused, a distant, almost wistful look entering her eyes, as if she were seeing one of Serafina's creations. Sometimes, when she was deeply immersed, she saw things. Things others didn't. Anomalies in the data. Glitches in the fabric of the city's history. The scent of damp concrete from the street seemed to sharpen, mingling with the phantom scent of old data and digital dust. Jake took a sip of his cold, bitter coffee. "Things like what?" he asked, his voice low, a conspiratorial whisper. He knew this kind of seeing could get you killed in Shadowfall. "Secrets," Elara whispered, leaning forward slightly, her emerald eyes suddenly intense. She was working on a project about the founding families of Shadowfall. The old money. The ones who built this city on, well, on shadows, they say. On deals made in the dark, on resources plundered, on lives exploited. She believed they had a darker history than anyone knew. Jake knew about the founding families. They were the true, unchallenged power in Shadowfall, a tight-knit group of ancient corporations that controlled everything from the city's vast energy grids to its omnipresent information networks. The City Watch enforcers mostly answered to them, their armored boots marching to the rhythm of corporate interests. Going against them was like trying to punch fog, you never quite hit anything solid, but you could still get lost, suffocated, and eventually, disappear without a trace. He felt a familiar knot of unease tightening in his stomach. Did she seem scared before she vanished? He pressed, trying to gauge the level of threat. Was this a personal dispute, or something far more systemic? Elara nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to her tightly clasped hands. She was excited at first, almost giddy with discovery. Then, about a week before she vanished, she became secretive. Guarded. She bought a burner comm unit, the untraceable kind. She told me she was getting close to something big. Something dangerous. She mentioned a hidden ledger, something about the city's true foundations, something that would unmake the Titans if it ever came to light. A hidden ledger. That sounded like corruption on a scale even by Shadowfall's abyssal standards. A missing data sculptor looking into the founding families, a group that largely operated above the law, beyond public scrutiny. Jake suddenly felt a familiar tug, a pull deep in his gut that drew him towards the messy, dangerous truths nobody else wanted to touch, or dared to. This was why he remained a data scrapper, despite the risks and the meager pay. He lived for these shadows, for the faint glimmer of justice he could sometimes coax from the darkness. "All right, Miss Thorne," Jake said, pushing his chair back, the springs groaning a final protest. He flicked his unlit cigarette, then crushed it in a grimy ashtray. "I'll take the case. What do you have for me?" "Anything that can give me a lead, a direction." Elara opened a sleek data packet she held, sliding it across his desk. It was an expensive piece of tech, far beyond his usual client's means. "Her last known comm log," she explained, her voice regaining a measure of control, a business-like efficiency. "It's encrypted, but I know she would have left a backdoor for me. A few raw data chips from her workshop, what little the watch didn't confiscate or deem irrelevant. And this." She revealed a small, intricately carved data charm, pulling it from around her neck. It looked like a piece of salvaged black circuit board, shaped into a delicate, geometric pattern. It glowed faintly with a dim, pulsing blue light, a tiny, digital heart. She wore this constantly. Said it was a key to her most private data vault, her mind archive. She called it her inner sanctum. Jake picked up the charm. It felt cool and smooth in his calloused fingers, surprisingly light. He recognized the craftsmanship, it was custom, likely built by Serafina herself. "This could be very useful," he muttered, turning it over, feeling the subtle hum of the data locked within. He looked back at Elara, his expression stern. "It's going to cost you. Up front. My rates aren't cheap for this kind of work, and the risks are substantial." She nodded, her gaze firm. "I understand. Whatever it takes." Without a word, she initiated a transfer from her personal comm unit to his account. The chime on his holopad indicated a hefty sum had arrived. It was more than enough to cover a month of rent, keep his systems running, and buy a generous supply of that cheap, fiery alcohol he so favored. He had a sinking feeling he'd need every drop of it before this case was through. The rain outside intensified, a fitting prelude to the storm he was about to step into. Jake started his investigation in the Glimmer district. Even under the constant, dreary rain, it sparkled, almost defiantly. Holographic ads for high-end cybernetic enhancements and luxury nutrient paste shimmered on every skyscraper's surface, projecting perfect, augmented faces and impossibly smooth bodies. Clean, efficient delivery drones hummed through the air like metallic bees, ferrying packages to the privileged. But even underneath the dazzling glitter, Jake, with his seasoned eyes, sensed the same familiar grime, the same underlying tension that permeated the lowest levels of the sprawl. It was just better hidden, cloaked in expensive illusion. Serafina Thorne's apartment was in a sleek, anonymous tower, one of many indistinguishable glass monoliths that pierced the perpetual twilight. The City Watch enforcers had already been through it, their heavy-handed methods leaving behind faint energy traces of their scanners, scorch marks where they'd forced entry, and a general aura of disruption. Jake's own, older, more subtle tools were less invasive. He ran a damp scan, picking up ghost signals of forgotten comm chatter, faint thermal imprints on the floor where furniture used to be, a lingering scent of synth paintings and electronic ink. Serafina had cleared out almost all her personal tech, taking only what was essential or what she absolutely couldn't leave behind. This wasn't a sudden, unplanned disappearance, it was deliberate, at least in part. But why leave the key to her mind archive with her sister? That was the anomaly. He moved methodically through the sterile apartment, his movements fluid and quiet, a shadow against the shifting holographic light from outside. His fingers, calloused from years of manipulating data chips and old hardware, brushed along walls, searching for hidden compartments. He finally found a small, almost invisible compartment behind a loose wall panel near a disused maintenance port, barely noticeable unless you knew exactly what to look for. Inside, there was nothing but a single, blank data chip, pristine and unscarred. Jake frowned. It seemed too obvious, too neat. A plant? A misdirection? Or a carefully placed message meant for him, an opening gambit in a digital game of chess? He took out the data charm, the Mind Archive key, and inserted it into his own portable terminal, a battered but highly modified piece of equipment. It hummed to life, projecting a complex, shifting interface, a vibrant tapestry of data that pulsed with an almost organic rhythm. Serafina's Mind Archive was a sprawling, artistic creation in itself, a digital labyrinth mirroring her own creative genius. It wasn't merely a storage drive. It was a curated experience, filled with raw data, shimmering images, and snippets of sound, all woven together with a unique artistic flair. It was like sifting through someone else's most intricate dreams, each file a memory, a vision, a carefully constructed thought. He navigated through layers of artistic projects, virtual landscapes that seemed to breathe, and abstract data sculptures that defied easy categorization. He found deeply nested files related to the founding families, cryptic old corporate records, half-decoded communication logs from decades ago, schematic overlays of ancient city infrastructure, blueprints that predated even the modern Shadowfall. Serafina had indeed been digging deep, excavating the digital foundations of the city. Her notes, terse and often poetic, hinted at a growing unease, a sense of something profoundly wrong beneath the polished surface. He finally found a hidden folder, buried beneath layers of decoy files and encrypted with a sophisticated, personalized cipher. It was marked only with a stylized glyph of a raven, wings spread as if in flight. Inside, there was a single, heavily encrypted video log. Jake initiated playback, the blue light of the terminal illuminating his own weary face. Serafina's face appeared on the screen, illuminated by the cold blue light of her own monitor. She looked pale, almost translucent, her usually vibrant emerald eyes shadowed with a profound, bone-deep fear. "If you're seeing this, Elara," her voice was a strained whisper, barely audible above the digital static, "it means I'm gone. They know. The families. Not all of them, not yet, but one. The Solara conglomerate." Her gaze darted nervously to the side, as if she expected someone to burst into the room at any moment. Jake leaned closer, his full attention riveted to the screen. Solara conglomerate. One of the biggest, most influential of the founding families. They controlled the city's vast energy and communication networks, the very pulse of Shadowfall. Their reach was omnipresent, their power absolute. Serafina continued, her voice trembling, each word an effort. "I found it, Elara. The Veiled Ledger. It's not just about money, or corporate espionage. It's a network. A horrifying, insidious network. They're using the city's oldest energy conduits, the abandoned sublevels, the forgotten infrastructure, to run something. Something that's not just illegal, it's inhumane. Beyond anything I could have imagined. She coughed, a dry, nervous sound that echoed unnaturally in the recording. They're harvesting something. Life force, they call it. From the forgotten. The untraced. The digital ghosts of the lowest sectors. The City Watch is blind to it, or worse, an active part of it. Jake felt a chill colder than the perpetual rain seep into his bones. Life force harvesting. That was a nightmare from old dataflix, a horrifying myth whispered in the dark corners of the sprawl, a chilling urban legend used to scare children. It was said that the truly powerful, the ancient families, could extend their lives, enhance their abilities, or even fuel their technologies by draining the bioenergy of others, the disposable masses. But it was just a story, wasn't it? A horrifying, impossible urban legend. Until now. Serafina's image flickered, as if the very data stream was struggling to contain the horror of her revelation. The ledger points to a specific place. An old power station. Deep under the Ashfall slums. Code name, the Conduit. I'm going there, Elara. I have to see it myself. I have to know. This ledger, it shows who they are. Their true faces. Their monstrous acts. I'll send the full, unencrypted file to a dead drop if I can. If I don't, you know where to look. Trust no one. No one at all. The video ended abruptly, cutting to static, leaving only the chilling echo of her words in the quiet office. Ashfall slums. That was the deepest, darkest, most desperate part of the sprawl, a place where the rain never truly washed away the grime, where the poorest and most desperate lived in crumbling, forgotten sectors, far from the neon glow of the glimmer. And the Conduit. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore. This was a dive into the very deep, dark, and corrupt heart of Shadowfall. Jake clenched his jaw. He had to go. The Ashfall slums were a world away from the Glimmer district, not just physically but culturally, morally. Here, the neon signs were broken, flickering with dying light, casting grotesque shadows that danced like phantoms. The rain collected in stagnant, refuse-choked puddles, reflecting only the grime and decay rather than the promised shimmer of progress. The air was thick with the smell of mold, decay, cheap stimulants, and a pervasive, underlying desperation. The buildings were ancient, crumbling husks, leaning on each other like drunken giants after a long, hard night, their skeletal frames barely holding themselves upright. The City Watch rarely patrolled here, considering it a lost cause, a drain on resources. That left the labyrinthine alleys to the desperate gangs, the forgotten souls, and the predators who fed on them. Jake navigated the treacherous streets in his battered ground car for a time, its old engine groaning in protest against the uneven, potholed pavement. The vehicle, a relic from a bygone era, barely made it through the deepest puddles. He had to ditch it eventually, finding a derelict alley to abandon it, slipping into the narrow walkways on foot. His old coat, once a shield against the elements, now blended perfectly with the ever-present shadows, making him just another ghost in the forgotten district. He kept his hand near his custom-built stun pistol, a heavy piece of pre-collapse tech that rarely failed, its familiar way to cold comfort. He spent hours sifting through the grime, his senses on high alert. The constant drip of water, the distant shouts, the low thrum of illicit activity, it was the symphony of the slums. He asked questions in hushed tones, carefully choosing his targets. Most people in Ashfall kept to themselves, wary of strangers, especially those who looked like they might be connected to the Watch, or worse, to the corporate enforcers. But Jake knew how to blend, how to earn a momentary trust with a shared, low-grade cigarette or a quiet word of empathy. He asked about old power stations, about rumors of strange disappearances that went beyond the usual, about whispers of harvesting, a word that, even here, was usually uttered with a shiver. He finally found an old-timer, a data junkie named Cinder who looked like he'd been born in a puddle and raised on raw circuits. Cinder was huddled in the doorway of a collapsed building, nursing a bottle of something truly foul, its contents glowing faintly in the gloom. His eyes, barely visible behind layers of dirt, grime, and ancient, mismatched tech, held the haunted wisdom of someone who'd seen too much of Shadowfall's underbelly. Jake offered him a good, genuine whiskey, a rare treat in these parts, and Cinder's eyes widened, a flicker of something almost human appearing in them. The conduit, eh? Cinder rasped, his voice a gravelly whisper, taking a greedy swig from the bottle. They say it's just a myth. An old power plant, shut down decades ago. Full of the city's old bones, they say. Buried history. He shivered, despite the surprising warmth of the expensive whiskey, clutching the bottle tighter. But people do go in. The untraced. The lost. Never come out. Not truly. Strange light sometimes, in the deep hours. Low hum. Like something alive down there, breathing, feeding. He pointed a gnarled, grimy finger deeper into the sprawling, crumbling district. Deep under. You gotta know the tunnels. Old maintenance routes. Watch don't go there. Even the gangs avoid it. Say it's cursed. Cinder drew a shaky map in the dirt with his finger, outlining a section beneath the oldest, most decayed part of Ashfall, a place even the sun's artificial light never reached. Down the old ventilation shaft, past the collapsed sewage pipes, then look for the symbol of the broken gear. That's the way. It's a maze, a death trap. Don't say I didn't warn ya, Data Scrapper. Armed with Cinder's shaky directions and a fresh wave of profound unease, Jake set off. The further he went, the darker and narrower the alleys became, the more the hum of the city above seemed to fade, replaced by the relentless drip of unseen water, the scuttling of unseen things in the shadows, and the growing, oppressive weight of the earth above him. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something subtly metallic and sweet. He found the entrance Cinder described, a rusted, forgotten access panel, almost entirely obscured behind a mountain of refuse, old circuits, and discarded bio-waste. The air here was heavy, cold, and unnaturally still, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath. It smelled strongly of ozone, stagnant water, and something else, something subtly organic, like raw meat or freshly spilled blood, a smell that prickled the back of his throat. Jake pulled out a high-intensity glow rod, its powerful beam cutting through the absolute gloom, revealing a narrow, slime-slicked tunnel that seemed to stretch into forever, disappearing into the city's forgotten bowels. He walked for what felt like an hour, the low, rhythmic hum of distant machinery growing steadily louder, a deep throb that seemed to vibrate in his bones, through the soles of his worn boots. The tunnels twisted and turned, eventually opening into vast, cavernous spaces, ancient power conduits, their massive pipes now draped with layers of thick, phosphorescent fungus and perpetually dripping water. This was an ancient part of Shadowfall, a vast, subterranean network, long forgotten, bypassed by the modern city above, its existence known only to a select few. It was a tomb, and now, a prison. The hum intensified, becoming a palpable vibration in the air. He saw a faint, pulsing light ahead, a soft, sickly green that illuminated the tunnel walls with an eerie glow. As he got closer, the air grew warmer, almost humid, thick with the metallic tang of heated circuits and that cloying, organic scent. He crept forward, his hand instinctively gripping the worn handle of his stun pistol, the cold metal a stark contrast to the rising heat in the air. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but Seraphina's face, pale and terrified in the video log, pushed him onward. He found it, a cavernous chamber, immense and horrifying, dimly lit by pulsing green energy cells embedded in the walls. In the center, a huge, silent machine hummed, its presence almost suffocating. It looked like something from a nightmare, a construct of cold, calculating evil. Gleaming chrome and dark, segmented cables snaked around a central column of swirling green light, which pulsed with an unnerving, biological rhythm. And around it, suspended in clear, fluid-filled tanks that glowed with the same sickly green, were figures. Dozens of them. They were human, or at least, they had been. Gaunt, pale, their eyes closed in what looked like an unnatural sleep, their bodies unnervingly still. They were connected to the massive machine by a tangle of clear tubes, their life force, their very essence, being slowly and systematically drained into the central column, consumed by the pulsating green light. This was the conduit. The chilling urban legend wasn't just real, it was worse than any story. It was a factory of stolen lives, a monument to a depravity he hadn't believed possible. Jake felt a cold wave of utter disgust, a profound nausea rising in his throat. Who would build such a thing? Who would operate it? And for what purpose could this horror serve? He moved stealthily, keeping to the deepest shadows, his presence a whisper in the echoing chamber. He saw data terminals near the tanks, displaying complex readouts of bioenergy levels, processing speeds, and names. He zoomed in on one screen with his communit's optical scanner. The names were of the forgotten, the untraced, beggars, addicts, digital nomads who had slipped through the cracks of Shadowfall's hypermonitored system, becoming statistical ghosts. And then, his blood ran cold. He saw it. A single name, prominently displayed, listed as Active Harvest, Priority 1. Jake's breath hitched, a sharp, painful gasp in the oppressive air. She wasn't just missing, she was here, in prison, being harvested. She was alive, but barely, her life flickering like a dying data stream. His stun pistol felt suddenly heavier in his hand, no longer a mere tool but an instrument of desperate justice. He saw a control panel nearby, less sophisticated than the Panopticon Collective's omnipresent tech, but still complex, clearly designed for efficiency rather than human interaction. It had a glowing logo on it, a stylized, multi-limbed creature, its sharp lines unnervingly predatory. The unmistakable symbol of the Solara conglomerate. They were not merely funding this, they were the architects, the silent butchers. They were harvesting life force. For power. For immortality. For a monstrous, dark energy source to fuel their empire. He had to get Serafina out. And he had to get proof. The hidden ledger Serafina mentioned had to be here, somewhere within the system. He began a frantic scan of the terminals for any sign of a central database, a master log. Just then, a door hissed open at the far end of the chamber, cutting through the low hum of the machinery. Two figures in black, armored suits walked in, their faces hidden by dark, reflective visors. They carried long, unsettling energy rifles, their barrels glowing with a faint, internal light. Solara enforcers. Their movements were precise, their presence a cold, undeniable threat. He was not alone. Jake melted deeper into the shadows of the cavern, pressing himself against the cold, damp rock, moving like a ghost. His heart pounded in his chest, a frantic drum against his ribs. Two heavily armed, highly trained enforcers against one weary, outmatched private investigator. The odds were grim, nearly impossible. He knew he couldn't engage them head-on. He had to be smart, cunning. His gaze darted around the cavern, searching for any advantage. His eyes landed on the control panel. If he could disrupt the system, overload it, maybe he could free Serafina, or at least cause enough chaos to create an opening for escape. He fired a precise stun blast, a focused beam of kinetic energy, hitting one enforcer squarely in the chest. The armored figure crumpled instantly, a jolt of green light sparking violently from his heavily reinforced suit as the kinetic charge disrupted his internal systems. The other enforcer reacted with terrifying speed, his energy rifle snapping up, its barrel spitting a searing crimson bolt of pure energy. Jake rolled instinctively behind a massive, rusted power conduit, narrowly avoiding the blast that charred the wall where his head had been moments before. Intruder, the remaining enforcer's voice crackled through a speaker in his helmet, distorted and menacing. Identify yourself. Halt, or be neutralized. Jake didn't answer. He popped up from behind cover, firing another stun blast, but the enforcer was quicker, anticipating his move. A shimmering energy shield, barely visible, flickered into existence around his arm, deflecting the blast harmlessly. Jake cursed under his breath. These weren't ordinary corporate security guards. They were well-trained, heavily augmented, and clearly accustomed to dealing with resistance. He ducked back behind cover, his mind racing. He needed a bigger distraction. His eyes darted around, spotting a weak point in the ancient power grid above them, a series of exposed, sparking cables, their insulation crumbling with age, arcing intermittently with raw energy. Risky, but possible. A calculated gamble. He aimed carefully, his hand steady despite the throbbing pain in his arm. He fired a precise shot at the cables. The stun blast, rather than stunning a person, overloaded the fragile, ancient wiring. Sparks erupted with a violent hiss, then a small, controlled explosion, showering the cavern with hot metal and blinding flashes of light. The alarms, already blaring, intensified into a deafening wail. The enforcer cried out, momentarily disoriented by the unexpected explosion, his visored head snapping towards the chaos. Jake seized the fleeting chance. He sprinted towards the control panel, dodging falling debris and shimmering arcs of electricity. The enforcer recovered quickly, his rifle spitting wildly, trying to track Jake through the smoke and flashing lights. One searing blast grazed Jake's arm, ripping through his worn coat and leaving a painful, burning line across his skin. He gritted his teeth, pushing through the pain. He reached the panel, his fingers flying across the glowing keys, a blur of motion. He needed an emergency shutdown, anything that wasn't a death sentence for Serafina. He found a series of complex maintenance protocols, buried deep within the system. With a grim resolve, he initiated a full system purge, a desperate gamble that he hoped would release the tanks, or at least disable the harvesting process. The alarms reached a fever pitch, a piercing, maddening wail that echoed through the cavern, seeming to vibrate in his very skull. The sickly green light in the central column flickered violently, then began to dim, the swirling energy within it sputtering. The fluid in the tanks shimmered, bubbling, then began to recede. "No!" the enforcer yelled, a guttural roar of frustration and rage, rushing him with surprising speed. Jake punched a final command, emergency release, all units. The tanks hissed, their reinforced seals breaking with a loud crack. The fluid within them began to rapidly drain, emptying into unseen conduits below. The captive figures slumped within their tanks, no longer supported by the buoyant liquid. He focused on Serafina's tank, his heart pounding. Her eyelids fluttered open, confused, weak, her emerald eyes unfocused, but alive. The enforcer reached him, his massive, armored arm swinging a heavy, energy-charged fist. Jake barely managed to block it, the sheer force of the blow knocking him back, sending him sprawling. He fell, hitting his head hard on the concrete floor, a blinding flash of white light exploding behind his eyes. His vision blurred, the cavern spinning. "You'll regret this, data scrapper," the enforcer growled, his voice a low, menacing rumble through the comms, raising his rifle for a final, lethal shot. He was going to execute him. Suddenly, a blinding flash erupted from the cavern's upper reaches, followed by a sharp, mechanical whir, impossibly fast. The enforcer screamed, a sound of agony and surprise, as a sleek, black drone, tiny but agile, zipped into the chamber, firing precision energy blasts. It struck the enforcer's rifle, melting the barrel into slag, then hit his armored arm, causing him to stagger back, howling in pain, dropping his now useless weapon. Jake pushed himself up, his head throbbing, blood trickling from a cut on his temple. Cypher's drone hovered in the air, a silent, agile guardian, its optical sensors glowing faintly. "Get out, Riley." Cypher's voice, distorted but clear, came through a tiny comm unit on the drone, urgent and sharp. "The watch is on its way. Solaris flooding the tunnels with enforcers. Get out of there, now." The fluid in Serafina's tank had fully drained. She was weak, barely conscious, her body trembling. Jake rushed to her, pulling her out of the tank. She felt impossibly light in his arms, her skin cold and clammy. He could hear the distant, rising wail of city watch sirens, growing louder with every passing second. He knew the tunnels would be crawling with enforcers soon. He needed to get Serafina to safety. But he also needed the proof. The hidden ledger. He looked back at the control panel, the screen still flickering with raw, unencrypted data. The system purge was almost complete, but before it wiped everything, he saw it. The veiled ledger, the true operations log of the Solara conglomerate's horrific harvesting. It listed names, dates, amounts of life force extracted, and chillingly, the names of high-ranking City Watch officials who facilitated the transport of the untraced individuals, ensuring their disappearance was never properly investigated. This was the key. This was everything. Cipher. Download this. Jake yelled, his voice hoarse, pointing a shaky hand at the screen. It's the ledger. All of it. Every last damning detail. The drone whirred, extending a slim, almost invisible data cord. It latched onto the panel's data port, a frantic torrent of information flowing into its tiny, high-capacity memory core. The hum of the data transfer filled the cavern, a digital symphony of truth. Got it. Full download complete. Cipher commanded, their voice laced with triumph. Get out of there. Now. The primary access point is already sealed. I'll guide you through a secondary route. Jake hoisted Serafina over his shoulder, her frail body a surprisingly heavy weight of responsibility and grim purpose. He took one last, lingering look at the horrors of the conduit. The other harvested figures still slumped in their tanks, their fate uncertain, their bodies shivering from the cold, artificial air now flooding the chamber. He had saved Serafina. Now, he had to expose this. He had to bring justice to this dark place. He plunged back into the dark tunnels, Serafina's fragile body clutched tightly in his arms, the drone zipping ahead, a tiny beacon of light, guiding him through the labyrinthine passages. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer, their mournful cry a promise of pursuit and retribution. The hunt was on. Jake stumbled through the winding tunnels, the wails of the City Watch enforcers echoing ominously behind him, their heavy bootfalls growing closer. Serafina was a dead weight in his arms, her breathing shallow and ragged, a faint whisper against his ear. The drone, Cipher's agile eyes and ears, zipped ahead, a silent, flickering blue light, twisting through passages only a data ghost could have mapped with such precision. He could hear the barked orders of the enforcers, their synchronized movements indicating a full, professional sweep. They were closing in. Almost there, Riley. Cipher's voice was tight, urgent, breaking through the static of his community. Watch for a ventilation shaft, dead ahead. It's old, unsecured. It'll take you up 2 levels, outside the immediate search perimeter, into the old industrial sector. It's rough, but clear. Jake saw the shaft, a dark, rusted opening in the tunnel wall, barely visible in the drone's flickering light. It was a tight squeeze, barely wide enough for his shoulders, let alone with Serafina in tow. He pushed Serafina's fragile body through first, gritting his teeth, his injured arm screaming in protest as he awkwardly maneuvered her. Then, he squeezed himself in, scrambling upwards, his hands scraping against the rough, unforgiving metal. He emerged into a cramped, dusty service tunnel, higher than the one below, and blessedly, momentarily, silent. The air was cleaner here, less stale, carrying the faint, metallic scent of ozone and the distant hum of industrial machinery. He crawled for what felt like an eternity, Serafina still clutched tightly to him, her unconscious form a chilling reminder of the horrors they had just escaped. Every muscle screamed, every breath was a struggle. Finally, they reached a rusted grate. He pushed it open with a desperate heave, emerging onto a grimy, forgotten alleyway, several blocks from the conduit. The blessed rain was still falling, a cold, welcome spray on his face, washing away the grime and the fear. He found a secluded corner, pulling Serafina into the relative dry of a derelict doorway, sheltering her as best he could from the elements. Her eyes were barely open, unfocused, her body shivering uncontrollably. He had to get her medical help, fast. She wouldn't last much longer without it. But he also had the data. The ledger. The truth. Cypher, he whispered into his comm, his voice raw and strained, you got it all. Every bite. Every last bite, Riley, Cypher replied, their voice a mix of grim satisfaction and triumph. The veiled ledger. Names, dates, coordinates. The full horrifying extent of Project Chimera. And every single City Watch official involved, their transfers, their comm logs, their bank accounts. It's all there, cross-referenced and watertight. Good, Jake exhaled, a shaky breath. Good. Can you send it to a public channel? Everything. Make it impossible to suppress. Upload it to every news feed, every public display. Hit every server, every comm array. Burn it into the network. There was a pregnant pause on the line, a moment of digital contemplation. That's a big splash, Riley, Cypher's voice was sober now. A direct, unmitigated hit on Solara conglomerate and a significant portion of the City Watch leadership. They will come for you. Hard. There will be no hiding from this. They're harvesting people, Cypher, Jake said, his voice raw with a newfound, cold fury. They're turning forgotten souls into energy. They're literally consuming the lives of the most vulnerable. And the Watch is helping them. This city needs to see what's beneath the neon. It needs to wake up. Understood, Cypher said, the single word a testament to their unwavering loyalty and shared purpose. Consider it done. Initiating wideband, cascading data flood. Prepare for impact, Riley. And with that, the line went dead. Jake waited, pulling Serafina closer, sheltering her from the rain, his gaze fixed on the nearest public holodisplay. He knew Cypher wouldn't let him down. He could feel the tremors of something monumental, something irreversible, beginning to ripple through the very foundations of Shadowfall. Minutes later, a different siren wailed, closer this time, approaching rapidly. Not the harsh, authoritative shriek of the City Watch. This was a private medical transport, unmarked and discreet. Cypher, ever efficient, ever thinking ahead, had called in a contact from the underground. A small, sleek hover ambulance pulled up silently, its medical bay glowing faintly. Two figures in plain, neutral uniforms, their faces kind despite the grim circumstances, rushed out with a stretcher. They were from an underground medical network, the kind that helped those who fell through Shadowfall's cracks, the ones the official systems abandoned or persecuted. They carefully, gently, loaded Serafina onto the stretcher. She'll be safe, one of them promised, their voice calm and reassuring. We'll get her stable. But it'll be a long road to recovery, Riley. A very long road. Jake nodded, unable to speak, watching them load her into the ambulance. As the hover ambulance lifted off, its silent engines fading into the ambient city hum, a sudden, blinding flash erupted across the cityscape. It wasn't lightning. It was the digital pulse of Cypher's databomb, unleashed across Shadowfall's vast network. On every public screen, every towering holo ad, every personal compad, the glittering facade of Shadowfall Metropolis fractured. The smiling, augmented faces of corporate executives flickered and distorted. The sleek, seductive ads for new tech dissolved into static. In their place, a torrent of raw, unedited, horrifying data exploded across the city's network, overriding every existing display. The screens displayed stark, undeniable images of the conduit's dark, cavernous chambers, the rows of fluid-filled tanks, the pale, lifeless forms suspended within them. They showed flickering snippets of Seraphina's chilling video log, her trembling voice recounting the nightmare. And then, the text began to scroll, relentlessly, damningly, the veiled ledger, detailing the life force harvest, in excruciating, quantified detail. It named the Solara conglomerate as the mastermind, the architect of this monstrous operation. It listed the names of high-ranking City Watch enforcers, their faces appearing next to the horrific details of their complicity, their transfers of untraced assets, their financial gains from the suffering. The words, Project Chimera, the sinister name for their horrifying harvest operation, flashed across screens in blood-red text, tying every piece of evidence together into an undeniable narrative of depravity. Shadowfall Metropolis erupted. The rain-slicked streets, usually filled with the quiet hum of commerce and the distant, controlled wail of watch sirens, now filled with shouts, screams, and a collective roar of disbelief turning rapidly into fury. People poured out of buildings, stopping in their tracks, staring at the glitching, truth-telling public screens, their faces shifting from confusion to horror, then to an incandescent, righteous outrage. The carefully constructed facade of the founding family's benevolence, of the City Watch's integrity, of Shadowfall's shiny, progressive image, had been ripped apart, exposing the rot beneath. The immediate aftermath was pure, unadulterated chaos. The City Watch enforcers were completely overwhelmed. Their comm channels jammed with the digital noise of Cypher's databomb, their public image shattered beyond repair. Protests erupted spontaneously in every district, not just the grimy, oppressed lower levels, but even in the insulated, complacent Glimmer district, where people felt personally betrayed by the corporations they had implicitly trusted, the very foundations of their comfortable lives revealed as built on horror. The Solara conglomerate stock plummeted to zero within hours, their vast financial empire crumbling. Their corporate towers became targets of angry mobs, forcing immediate, unprecedented lockdowns and requiring military-grade security to prevent total collapse. The Council of Guilds, the closest thing Shadowfall had to a legitimate governing body outside the founding family's iron grip, was thrown into utter disarray. Public outrage forced their hand. They demanded immediate investigations, mass arrests, and accountability. The named City Watch officials, their faces now infamous images of corruption, were immediately suspended, then apprehended amidst chaotic, public scenes, their armored units unable to protect them from the fury of the populace. The myth of life force harvesting, once a whispered urban legend, had become terrifyingly real, undeniable fact, and the public would not, could not, stand for it. Jake Riley, bruised and exhausted, his wounded arm throbbing with a dull ache, watched it all unfold from a secluded, rain-slicked rooftop overlooking the magnificent, chaotic implosion of the city's lies. A grim satisfaction settled deep in his gut, a quiet, profound sense of accomplishment he hadn't felt in years. He had done it. He had pulled back the curtain on Shadowfall's darkest secret, tearing down the illusion that had kept its citizens docile and blind. Cypher contacted him, their voice almost triumphant, the metallic distortion in their voice unable to mask the exhilaration. "It's a beautiful mess, Riley. The whole network is in meltdown. They're going to come for you. Hard. They'll never stop looking." "I know," Jake replied, watching the flickering chaos below, the digital fireworks of truth consuming the city's lies. "But they won't find me easily. The shadows are deep, and I know them better than anyone." He became a ghost again, fading into the perpetual night of Shadowfall, a phantom figure moving through the undercurrents. He moved from safe house to safe house, a hunted man, a pariah to the powerful, but also, unknowingly, a hero to many he'd never meet. The private investigator business, the legal kind, was likely over for him. His life as he knew it, shattered. But his new purpose was clear, etched in the chaos he had unleashed. Seraphina Thorne, slowly, painfully, recovered in the dedicated care of the underground medical network. She would never be the same, the trauma had left indelible marks, both physical and psychological. But she was alive, a living testament to the horror, a survivor. As she began to heal, she would become a quiet but powerful voice in the new, burgeoning movement for truth and justice. Her artistic eye now focused on documenting the raw reality of Shadowfall's awakening. The conduit was raided, its horrors exposed to the harsh light of official scrutiny. The remaining harvested figures, rescued and given care by the same underground network that saved Serafina, served as undeniable, horrifying proof of the Solara conglomerate's crimes. The conglomerate faced unprecedented legal action, public outcry, and devastating boycotts, their absolute control over Shadowfall forever shattered. Their empire was in ruins. The City Watch enforcers underwent a forced, agonizing restructuring, their power greatly reduced, their public trust eroded to nothing. Their iron grip on the city, once absolute, now felt shaky, fragile. A seed of doubt, of distrust, had been planted in the heart of Shadowfall. Shadowfall Metropolis, once defined by its corporate control and manufactured transparency, was now a city in flux, in rebellion, in pain, but also in hope. The rain still fell, the neon still bled, but a new current ran beneath the grime, a restless, awakened populace demanding true accountability, genuine transparency, and a future free from the shadows of exploitation. The balance of power had shifted, irrevocably. The shadows of the alleys were no longer just places to hide, they were places where truth could be found, where resistance could grow, and where a new, uncertain future was being forged. Jake Riley was no longer just a data scrapper, he was a silent navigator of this new, unpredictable reality. His work, he knew, was just beginning.